So, like I just said, we're going to start working with the form workspace in Fusion. Now, this is essentially, if you've ever seen anything like that, it's called surface modeling, essentially. It's not directly, but we're also going to discuss that. But whereas we have been working pretty exclusively in dimensional working, be it, line extruding, stuff like that, all the direct, especially parametric modeling as well. The form sculpting workspace does not allow for as much or really much of it all parametric modeling because it's kind of like when you're working in the sketch workspace. There is no recorded history aspect with this. So everything you do needs to be done in one session. So as in, if you close out, save, close out, exit the program or whatever, and come back to it, you will not have the cached memory within the fusion aspect. You will not have that history slider at the bottom to work back and forth from. But first, I want to talk a little bit about what it's called is T-Spline modeling. And there's two main different types. I think I can't remember which one SolidWorks uses. I know Rhino uses. It's called NURBS modeling. It's an acronym, but it doesn't matter. Irrelevant for this part. We are using T-spline modeling, named very cleverly because stuff comes to a T. So essentially, think of your workspace or an object surface in a flat grid with broken up elements and such. Where it comes to an edge, that shapes a T. T-spline modeling. Very clever in name. But you need to remember the main points, which we have discussed repeatedly, but this is going to be very important with this method of working. So you have edges, which are the lines, which can be the exterior edges or any of the internal intersecting edges. You have the points that those meet, any and all, at all intersections, anytime any edges meet. These are your vertexes, if I can spell. Vertex vertices. And then the overall shape in between all of these, as in your edges and your vertices, everything in between here, that face is just that. Your faces. How we're going to work with that is these are going to be your interactable objects, your interaction or the ways of interacting. There's going to be isolators, as in just like when we're like manipulating an object, move it either laterally in one direction, up and down scale, and only the X or Z or all that kind of stuff. Same deal here. How this works is you can pull a single point, drag it up and down, and stuff will follow along. You're dragging along by that vertex. That's if you're selecting by vertex. But what it's going to do is, depending on how you approach it, it's going to drag all of those elements around. So if you've seen like the modeling, if you've seen like the model in like physics and such, where like space-time dilation, we're not going to get into physics, but you get the whole like, imagine a big sheet, a big grid, a big net. You pull on one thing and the whole thing comes with it and such. If you have a much larger object, gravity and such, you're pulling a much larger section of that net. Kind of sort of the same thing. Obviously, it's not the same, but kind of sort of, because you can select by just the vertex. You can select by edges and drag entire lines up, or you can select by faces, which then drags vertices and edges along with it. And of course, you can set the amount of impact that has. But that's essentially how the form workspace, the sculpting workspace works within Fusion, is by manipulating by edges, vertices, and the faces that those create. Now, obviously, there's a whole bunch of different ways of manipulating them. There's direct pushing and pulling, stuff like that. There's scaling, there's twisting, you can extrude within, all that kind of thing. But that's essentially how this works. By moving it up, by creating basic forms, manipulating from there, you can add, subtract, do whatever you want. But that's really at the core. Remember that they have everything that's aligned is an edge, where they intersect is a vertex, and the space in between is a face. So let me pop over to Fusion and we'll start playing with this. All right. So far we've basically been working with sketches, extrusions, revolves, blah, 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 all that kind of fun. This little pink gumball form form is what we're going to be working with today. So as soon as you click that, it shifts all your tools around in Fusion like it normally does, unless it's going painfully slowly. There you go. And you have you can create with sketches, of course, and you have some basic shapes that then you can manipulate from there. Now, one of the first things is, all right, a box. That's not a box. That's like a balloon. And that's exactly how you should consider this. Now, in reality, because it is looking all rounded, think of this in terms of like you've seen like a balloon or something like those mylar balloons, the more of like the metallic ones. It's essentially it's a cube, but it's kind of been blown up, kind of sort of the same thing. But honestly, how it's being shown, kind of rounded, is just a visual mechanism, as in we can alter that looking how or seeing how it looks. Between you have plane, which obviously is all of these in this whole virtual plane, so you can create a whole surface plate. You have your other basic geometric shapes cylinder. Now you'll note one thing on this cylinder is just the walls. The top and bottom are left open. We'll mess with those later. We have two different kinds of spheres. You have the quad ball, which is actually exactly more of the think of it in terms of like it is in fact a box, like a six-sided box that has been inflated to the point of it being a rounded sphere. Reason for that is just different ways of manipulating. The other one is your standard sphere, like a globe. It has longitude and latitude. Getting those combobulated, and then you can also create just individual faces. So this is excellent for just building your own planes and such like that. Why you would build those? Sometimes you need to actually just work from just planar aspects, which is exactly what we're going to be doing. And obviously, when you go down to create, there's more. There's torus. There's pipe. Pipe creates more edges, more surfaces, much more. You can actually control the entire surface of that. But you still have your extrude, your revolve, your sweep, and loft. So you got all your basics in there. Modify is where we're going to spend a lot of time with these. Okay. One of the most important ones we're working with is edit form. It's the first one over here. This allows you to do exactly that, manipulate all of these through the edit form and be able to pull apart, move around, and all that such. And then, of course, there's also some of the other basics, insert edge, which just allows you to create your shape, and then you can throw in, you want to make it more complex, add in some other edges. And that's going to be one of the main names of the game with working with this. Do not make your shapes, your forms, too complex right from the get-go. Start simple, add complexity where needed, because if you have an overly detailed surface, you're going to have a lot more modifiers to have to juggle, to have to keep track of. If you only have a few edges and vertices to deal with, you could always break those up more even, or break those up into smaller areas where needed. And then you also have one of the main ones we're going to work with is thicken, which is just that. Creates something thick, creates thickness of the shape. So one of the best things I tell everybody is just start playing with this. So one of the things is like, say, we'll create a box. Just like anything else, decide what plane you want to work from, start in the center, this builds outward. Don't hit enter, just left click. You can, of course, add in your dimensions if you want. Let's say 50, I don't know, 60, sure, great, whatever. There, and then you can drag upward. And you'll see your toolbox appears here, and you have a bunch of options. Here you can go back and manipulate all of these. It allows you to subdivide the surface between faces. So obviously you, of course, have the other slider. You can add and subtract, but this is what I mean by don't add too many too soon. There's no reason whatsoever to keep a surface this complex. Keep it simple, add complexity later. If you need to add a little more detail, sure, go to 3 faces instead, that sort. You can work with this different ways. Symmetrical, that was just a different input device. You can add symmetry right here. We'll show you how to do it later also but clicking the symmetry option, you can check off here, and you can see it highlights in green which lines and which line is symmetrical by. That way it makes a lot more sense, left and right, up and down. So this is certainly one of the areas where keep it simple and add complexity later. Let's just leave it on that. Great. So one of the things you can start to do here now is say like go to edit form. This is what allows you to select individual elements. So right now the selection feature, and we're going to jump down to the selection feature here, the other stuff we don't really need to deal with right now. All means you can select all the things. You can select a face, you can select an edge, you can select a vertice, you could double click on an edge and it'll select all the way one direction, or if it's symmetrical that way, it'll double click and select all the way around. You can isolate by selecting just by vertex. You can see, obviously, it's only selecting vertices, by edge alone, or by faces alone. The reason you do this, just different reasons. Just it depends on what you're trying to create, what you're trying to modify. We'll get into this soft modifications and stuff in a bit, but I just want to show you how this works. So let's just say by vertex. Let me just grab one, and you have this all access gimbal here. This is your free transform mode. This is the selects all the things, isolates, and this I'm looking at the top line here, transform mode. You have just by direction, so across the y-axis, z-axis, or sorry, that's x-axis, z. The flat planes in between allow you to freely manipulate in between. Isolate by edge, drag upward, or double click, it selects all around. From here, one of the other things to do is if I select all the things, you can also scale. If you have all the transform active, highlighting over the center, the little three triangles form over the circle, that allows you to shrink and grow by scale, or as you're clicking and dragging, you see the numeric input pops up. These are just scale factors. It's from 0 upwards, however your multiple or whatever your multiplier is. From 1 goes above, below obviously shrinks it. Because a scale factor of 1 is whatever you got times 1 is still the same thing. Yeah, those and the one other one is rotation. So you can start to rotate all this kind of stuff. Now, one of the things about working within this form workspace, you will very quickly, if you're just playing around, make some pretty funky shapes, but you will very quickly run into something that does not compute. As in, this is just like working in the sketch workspace. When you're finished, you would go to finish form. And if you got errors, it'll give you errors. And what these usually are from that shape, that form, that surface self-intersecting. You cannot self-intersect and create a solid shape because it just trips up the program. That's not how it works. So you go back in, say, okay, yep, you got a T-spline, failed to convert. That's what that means because it's usually self-intersecting. Go back. Oops, I hit continue instead of go back. So let me go back into the form workspace. The other thing I want to show you here is your utilities. There's only a couple here. The first one is your display mode. This is the easiest way to see what you're doing, or something like this, check repair mode or repair body. So select the body to repair, and it'll give you these little stars. It's showing me, okay, there's a bunch of stuff that's messing up. Let's hit auto repair, see if it does anything. It won't always. So in this case, it's pretty obvious. It's showing you this section here. Whenever you see something that is kind of blotting this coloration blotting back and forth between the red error color and something else, that's just an object or two different objects occupying the same space, and we'll let you do that. So let's cancel out of the auto or the repair body and go to display mode. This is going to let you go from the rounded shape type or control or just box display. And frankly, this is how a lot of modeling programs work, is where you're modeling in more of a hard geometric shape. So it's not curving, but instead you're seeing flat angles and such, and then you can round it out later. But this is an easy way of seeing stuff because it just simplifies stuff a bit more for you. So from here, like, okay, this is simply a display mode. It has not changed my object whatsoever. So if that's what's going wrong, I can go back into the edit form and say grab by, let's say by face this time. So I'll grab these two insides, and because it is symmetric against that green line, let's just drag that line over a little bit. Now it's going to leave this kind of ghost of an image because that is showing you what was. That's the only way it leaves it there so you have a frame of reference, because working the form workspace is not parametric modeling and you do not have a time slider to work back and forth from. You only have redo and undo. So you undo enough times, yeah, you can back it up. But otherwise, this is what you have. It leaves this ghost image, this artifact of this object, what was moved there. That way, let's hit OK. Let's try it out. Go to finish form. It's okay. We're good. It should have deleted that by now. I can go back in to edit form, go back in there. Not sure why it's showing me this error now. Okay. Yeah. Nothing to repair. Cool. Oh, now since it's repaired, it'll show it as a rounded object again. Okay, cool. Weird. I don't know why it's not deleting that. Okay. Anyhow. So if you want to make a more complex shape or continue to work and such, you can either edit, go back in, and continue to create, or create a new form body. That's all. You're just creating bodies here. But I want to show you some different ways of working here. Things like working with a plane. Obviously, I'm building on whatever plane I want, virtual plane, and I can just start from one, creates just like the center rectangle sketch object. We go to there, and then I can again add and subtract faces, keep it simple here, something to that effect. Do I want to add symmetry? Sure. Let's go width, not so much. Length, that works. So one side is going to be symmetric to the other. Okay. Now, I want to show you the difference here real quick. Right now, since I'm still in the form workspace, this is going to read as form objects. But when I go to finish form, one body is showing the symbol for a solid, like that little marshmallow symbol. The other is this orange semicircle, because if I orbit under, the first kind of rounded object, I don't know why that is not disappearing, is showing it as a complete rounded solid. The other, however, is showing, and let me switch to auto color view, see a little bit, so it's whatever color. One side will usually be this gold color, because right now, what I've essentially created is a sheet of paper. It has no actual dimension to it. It's simply the surface thickness. Whatever I do to it, it's still just the thickness of that sheet of paper. It is basically just 0, 1, or however even thin. There's no dimensionality to it whatsoever right now. So I go back in, edit form, and this is where I could play around with, again, adding like the edit form. So say I'll grab like a face, drag that upward. We start to manipulate from there. You can even extrude faces. So something effective like press and hold Alt, and it will actually add surfaces. Now, unfortunately, I've created this like hump thing, because when you have a face on either or on one side immediately abutting a symmetry line, if you don't include that edge line that it shares, it'll create a split object. So if I select there, problem is I cannot select the face between, or really just select both faces and it should get it. But I'm pressing and holding Alt, and there we go. So what I've actually done is see it added a face between there. It's a really great way of being able to manipulate an object well beyond what it already is. So something effective, say this shape here, this other one that I created. I could select one of the faces and literally delete it. The default creation is when you delete a face, it has edges. It's technically digitally some sort of rectangle, some sort of rhombus. It's going to default to creating as rounded an object as it can. So now I have another surface that is hollow because I just deleted that face. It's no longer complete. But something like this, I could create, go to Form Edit. Let's select by edge, and I'm just going to double click that edge all around that ring. Now I can drag that ring upward, stretch the whole thing, or if I press and hold Alt, it creates an extruded tube off of that. And this is where you can start getting real weird. So let's just play with like grabbing the freeze transform, pan it, rotate it, press and hold Alt. I'll grab by the pan, dragging outward, rotate. Again, press and hold Alt. Every time you have to release and then press and hold again, and you can continue to extrude. And you can see how you can really start manipulating a very simple shape and start creating some really complex and weird objects. And this is all simply because you can extrude these shapes and these forms. You are not locked into keeping even the remote original shape whatsoever. So from here, say, okay, that's great. It's still an open object, because if I go to hit finish form, still going to read. It's got that gold color. Same there. Symbol is still that close, or that open surface. So let's go back in there real quick. And one of the other main ones we're going to use, fill hole. It's pretty straightforward. Select there. That works by selecting around the edges. So you can double click, and you have some options here, as you always do. Fill hole reduces. Fill star, not that one. Collapse allows it to have a center vertex between the two. Usually you want to select this checkbox that welds the vertices. So when you close an object like that, sometimes it doesn't actually like fuse the whole thing. I don't know why. It's a very strange thing to manipulate. But check that box and then lock it in place. Or say you wanted to actually keep that end flat, the other checkbox, keep creases, and it sharpens the edge. There you go. Now that one will read as a solid object, and this one is still an open shape. Reason for that, again, go back one more time here, just playing around, because there's also no dimension to that. So that's where we would go in with like a thicken tool. Select the whole surface, and this works as, again, a three-dimensional offset tool. So, I don't know, 1 millimeter. Now, this is showing in the box display form just because you have some of the options here. Your thicken type is the edges, so you can create like a sharp walled thing, which doesn't work great if you have a rounded object. You can create a soft edge, which obviously, if it's round, it's round. And then you also can create no edge. So that's if you wanted to basically just create two separate walls and you wanted to fill in the sides later, that works. So we'll go with soft edge, see what happens. Now, even though it's pretty thin, it's worked that way. The only problem here is, crud, I really wanted that to be thicker. Well, this is why I'm saying you're not recording any history here. There's no way to record that history. So unless you are still planning to do some serious manipulation, you got to finish everything you're doing in the one session. So I'm going to hit Control Z, go back and reapply that thicken to there. Let's say instead I want to add a lot more dimension to it. Let's see where this takes me. Hit OK. Now it's a lot thicker. And again, it's giving me that ghost silhouette of what it was because you need some kind of frame of reference. And hit OK. It's so weird that it's not getting rid of that display there. So yeah, that's just some of the basics. I just saved there. Form edit. Ooh, they're not stools. Little dyslexia. The one I wanted to show you on here is the difference on these spheres and quad balls. So let's just play around real quick. I'll make a quad ball, which, like I said, is essentially a cube that is been inflated to a sphere. And then over here, let's create a sphere. Same deal. And again, I highly recommend dropping down the complexity of the faces so you have a little bit less to work, or it's a little bit easier to work with. Hit OK. All right, so I got these objects. They're just spheres. This is, again, where you can do things like apply symmetry after the fact. If you are trying to select symmetry like on a sphere like this, some really cool options come up. You see I selected the symmetry tool. There are a variety of symmetry tools. Internal is basically just your mirroring. I want one side to look like the other, okay? Circular is what would obviously work well for a spherical object because I'm making not just half and half, but I'm making multiple faces all match one another. Mirror duplicate is I'm making a separate mirrored object, the exact opposite of the thing I just made. Circular, now it's kind of like the circular tool, the circle pattern tool, but I'm making all of those also symmetrical. So what that also means is that, all right, I've made copies all in a circle. Now, if I manipulate the original, all of them change around. And then you have the clear symmetry, which just obviously deletes it. And then you have isolate. So if you wanted to, all the sides symmetrical except for one. There you go. So with the symmetry tool on, I'll select a face. And now if I select anything else, it's going to apply that symmetry across there. But if I keep selecting, weird, it usually gives me options. It's supposed to give you options. Cannot determine symmetry on that. Oh, you do want to make sure that it's copying them. There you go. So applies across. Cool. The other thing, like I said, would be symmetry. Let's just say clear that symmetry off that object. Yeah, delete it. There you go. What the heck? Okay, cool. It's not working like it should. There we go. Let's do circular symmetry. So here we go. If you do circular symmetry, it's giving you the options of if you select that side, symmetry on two sides. There, three sides. There, all six sides. Let's do three. Cool. You can see how the symmetry gets applied here. Gonna get weird. So now if you go to edit form, play around with this. Let's go by face. Right there. And like we said, we can extrude by pressing and holding Alt. So this is where you can really start to do some weird manipulation. But again, it's really easy to get stuck in here, meaning that it's really easy to start doing some weird stuff that then self-intersects, especially when you start rotating things. But again, press and hold, Alt, and then you can extrude it outward some more. So from there, if you know what, I don't like that, I'm going to make those ends round, open it back up. Now when I go back to edit form, selecting by edges, now I can get some other stuff going. I can scale it up and down so I can really start manipulating these things by simply extruding, twisting, and scaling. So you can start to get some really funky objects. But yeah, best thing with something like this, play around with the surfaces, play around with the tools, just see what they do, see where it takes you. You start getting some weird things. Like I said, if you go to finish form and you start getting errors, you have to go back and do some troubleshooting. No big deal. You can still manipulate these. You can still do things like extrude cuts, and you can still manipulate these just like you normally would with anything else. Obviously, some of the hole tools and fillet stuff like that don't work as well, but you could still say like apply a sketch and extrude straight through one of these and continue to manipulate these bodies, these sculpted bodies, with the tools we've been using so far. So the best thing, like I said, play around, see where it takes you. If you want to make solid bodies, you got to go back in, edit that form, because you cannot 3D print this shape until it has dimension. Now you technically could make this, you can try something like this form and add thickness to it. Maybe that'll work. It did. Now, if I go to finish form, hey, no errors. That is now an object, even though it's all hollow, that has dimension to it. So if I go to if I go to use section analysis on this thing, you can see a cross section of it. Funky as it might be, it does in fact have dimension to it. Now that's just the other body right there. So yeah, you can get some really weird stuff with this, but it's really easy to get lost, and you might have to end up, if you get too lost within an object, sometimes you have to delete whole sections, whole faces, and rebuild it from there. But honestly, it's not that difficult to work with. There's going to be a lot of troubleshooting with these. All right. So that's just playing around with that. So play around with the form workspace. We're going to experiment with it more and do some actual building.